Just a quick note before we play the video, we are not Active Directory certified specialists. Your environment or your working scenario may be different than what we are suggesting. That is possible. We're not saying it's wrong. We're not saying it's right. As always, refer to the documentation and seek training and certifications to do what's best for your environment. Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Scott. I am with C14G. We are a cybersecurity solutions provider for small and medium business. That can range from anything from firewalls, VPNs, remote workers, SNMP monitoring, IPAM, and various other tasks. We primarily focus on the edge, which means anything from the internet into your company or outbound as well. I wanted to make a video today to go over some of the misconfigurations. I don't think they're on purpose, but some of the common mistakes that we see in Active Directory implementations that are out in customer sites. I think if you wanted to know why these happen, it's typically due to poor training, asking IT staff to do more than they're comfortable with, and when you do that, things have a tendency to expand from ugly to uglier. You run into a problem where you can't troubleshoot the issue. This is 9 times out of 10, it's because of a poorly configured instance or directory structure or group policy settings or whatever that case may be. So I'm going to put myself here in the corner because sure, why not? I have some example configurations. I'm sorry, I was focused on something else there. I have some our test environment set up here, and I wanted to go over group policies, as I said earlier. So for the managements or executives that might be watching this video, group policies' main intention is to be able to set up your workstations hands-off. So if you hire somebody new in the marketing department, if you hire somebody new in the HR department, you would have to just configure their machine once inside of Active Directory. When you deploy it, group policy will push all those settings down automatically without any end user interaction. And ideally, you have a much easier to manage and control environment. That being said, a lot of the times this happens, or as it's designed to go out there, it doesn't work as intended. And one of the big problems that we see, let me go over to my notes here because I do have to take notes. One of the big problems that we see here is a lot of the times when we install line of business apps, it'll ask you to put a service account in the domain admins group. There's no need for that. In fact, we have, there's an article out there on the Microsoft page about which default groups have which access to help set this a little easier for you. So we will put this URL, or I will put this URL in the bottom of the video, but I wanted to point it out. This applies to Windows Server 2016. If you just do a search for Active Directory group access, you'll find the Microsoft KB articles out there. This is a long one. This is a 57-minute read. I'm showing Windows Server 2016 because 2008 is on its way out, and obviously 2003 is gone as well. They haven't changed very much since the original 2003, but this gives you a good idea of everything that's out there. It gives you the difference between the different types of groups. It gives you all the details you need. It also goes down further down the line and tells you what's the default security group and if it's in what version of Windows it's in. So you'll notice that Access Control Assistance Operators is not in 2008 R2. There might be another one out here. See, there's a few. There's no RDS management servers, no RDS remote access servers. And then if you go further down, it'll give you a detailed description of what each member or group access entails. That being said, again, I'll include that at the bottom of the video. Let's get back to here. The big problem that we see, there are too many users in the domain admins user group. There doesn't need to be. So a lot of the times you'll see an application, a line of business applications say, oh, we need to have a service account in the domain admins group to do XYZ to the workstations, if that's what the line of business app does. There are ways to get around that. For example, whoops, and I lost my notes again, sorry. So how do we configure it? Here at C14G, we recommend a default Windows workstation policy. This is something that we created. Inside of this, we set up user accounts. We have a group called Workstation Admins. We add that Workstation Admins group as a local administrator to each workstation, and we also add the Workstation Admins group to the Remote Desktop Users group, because obviously you want your remote desktop users to be able to connect to anybody. So we already know that the default workstation policy is going to apply to every workstation. And from there, the next recommendation is to separate your users and computer policies. What do I mean by that? When you make a policy, it's a security policy or a configuration policy for that computer or for that user. And what we've seen is a lot of companies have a tendency to mix the user configuration, which is down here, with the computer configuration that's down here. The downside to this is that computer configurations only get applied during restarts. Again, computer configurations only get applied when you restart the machine. Okay, so what we just said is not entirely true. We did go reference the Microsoft official documentation to try to get a clarification on when computer policies are applied versus when they aren't. And the short answer is it depends if it's a foreground computer policy or non-foreground computer policy. We will include a URL in our video description that gives the official link to the documentation. It isn't much, but it'll give you a better understanding. But based on engineering and in the field practice, we've always just taken it as we assume computer policies are during reboots, and we assume user policies are either during logon or some other event, possibly a log off. Thank you, and sorry for any confusion. And most of the places that we work, restarting machines is frowned upon, but it's a necessary evil. It is very important that you do it. It's very important that you set a dedicated time for your entire company to do it. Or if you're an enterprise, you should already have this policy and procedure in place. But why does that matter? Because I can go ahead and I can run a command here, and if it'll let me, well, I'm just gonna have to open it as admin. So I'll right click here, and I think I have command prompt as admin. So there's a command, gpresult/r. I wanted to point out here real quick, gpresult/r will give you what the results of its GP update when it restarts or when it's logging in, what policies are applied. So it starts here at the bottom without signifying the scope. It starts here at the bottom. You'll see the user is part of these groups. You'll also see, and you'll probably see our workstation admin in here. No, part of local admins, yeah. You'll see local admin in here. I happen to be on a domain admin account, so unfortunately you wouldn't see this, but it is there. You'll also, if you scroll up a little further, you'll see the computer is part of these policies. So this is useful for a diagnostic tool because you'll be able to see what policies are filtered out. They have a filtered out policy, and what policies are applied. This becomes more important when companies get larger, and I'm going to explain to you why it becomes more important later on. But if you ever needed to force the GP policy to be done, whether it's a user or a computer, you can just run gp update. If you run gp update, by default, it's only going to apply everything it can without restarting the computer. I don't even think it'll ask you to restart the computer. I've never seen it anyways, but I'm on video, so I don't want the worst to happen here. Okay, I was right. Hooray. So gp update says it ran the computer policy update, and it says it ran the computer policy or the user policy update, but as we already know, you can't update computer policies without restarting. So if you run gp update /sync, it'll ask you, do you wish to restart? No, and then it'll say, do you wish to log off? No. The reason that it asks you if you wish to log off, some policies only apply when you log back in. Again, most of the time, if you're going to run this command, you're going to pick yes and restart it anyways. So one of the common things that I've seen in automation is they will run this command for a restart. Ideally, though, you don't have to run it. Just a restart should be enough. The times where it's not is your time synchronization is off. By default, you only have 5 minutes between machine and servers. And if the machine has been disconnected for too long. For example, if you have a workstation or a laptop that you brought back into the office, you run gpupdate sync. If it can't authenticate with the domain controller, it'll say, it'll give you an error message and you'll have to unjoin the domain or rejoin the domain or restart. Anyways, getting back on task, sorry. What I recommend doing is setting up group policy objects, organizational units by department, or you can do it by floor, or you can do it by building if you're that large. But most of the time for the small, medium business sector that we're after, it's in departments. So inside the executive department, you would have another organizational unit, and you would call this computers. And you would call another one, new organizational unit, we would call this users. And then you would assign the associated group policy. Let's pretend this was called something else. Let's pretend this was the workstations for, let's call it the workstations for executives. You would then click and drag and shortcut it underneath the computers. And then, of course, if you don't know this already, you have to go assign the computer to that as well. So you'll see I added computers and users, but it's not here listed under domain users. So obviously you have to refresh if you make changes. So hit the refresh button or go to action refresh. Now you'll see that execs have their own users and computers, but there's nothing in them. So you would then drag the appropriate policies under their associated organizational units, or OUs. When you get to the enterprise level, it becomes a little bit more complicated. This is why it's important to start early. You'll see instead of the domain users and controllers, or domain users or workstation policies being separate, you'll see just a one tree, and you'll consider it'll be called, I'll just create a new organizational unit. It'll be called, I'll just call it company, right? And then after company, you would see new organizational unit, branch, or HQ. And then in HQ, you would have new organizational unit, first floor, second floor, third floor, fifth floor. But the downside to this is if it's going to change, it becomes a little messier. If all the executives are on the fifth floor, but 5 years down the road, they end up moving to the fourth floor, you have to move everything around. But that's part of enterprise group policy management. That is just, it comes with the territory. Another thing I wanted to point out here, a lot of people have a tendency to do this. They have a default domain policy, or they might have a default workstation policy, but they don't want certain users to have access or certain computers to have access. So you'll see when you have a shortcut here, it'll ask you to, you can set security for it. And what they will do is they'll hit the add button. They'll either remove that, or they'll add, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off. They'll add Scott. So they'll go in here and they'll say Scott doesn't have access to any of these things. They're not allowed to delete all objects. You can't read them. Don't mess with authenticated users. Don't try to mess with this at all. Authenticated users is any computer or any user. It's an or statement on the domain. So if you set up your group policies and folder structure appropriately, you shouldn't run into needing to have to do this. One more thing I wanted to point out, I guess we have two more. You don't need to, if you have your company as companyaa.com, and that's your outside domain. You want to get to my website, go to companyaa.com. And then you've got company or companyb.net or companya.whatever. Don't put your LAN DNS record, don't put your external DNS record hosted on your internal DNS. What do I mean by that? I think I have DNS on here. I think I have to go over here. What I mean by that is DNS isn't designed to host your external. DNS on your internal server isn't designed to host your external. And the reason that becomes a big issue, and I might not be able to show this because it might show too much information here. But the long story short is you would have companies, your external, right? So we're c14g.com. If I added c14g.com in here, any user that wanted to go to www.c14g.com wouldn't go to the external site. They would instead go to the internal site, and they would have to update this record. Well, as you expand, you're now relying on the server team to make application changes. Application changes is expecting whoever is managing the external DNS to worry about that. The long story short is if you need to reference your external sites internally, what you need to do is you can set that up on your firewall. You can literally set up a NAT, so anything that wants to get to that external address can get rerouted. We do it on WatchGuard. We can absolutely set it up for you, but there is no reason for you to set your external domain name inside your local area network domain configuration or your domain server or DNS manager. I just wanted to point out some of the issues that we see. These are the common things that we see as we go into companies. Professionally, it's issues I've seen for the past 15 years or so, and hopefully this puts you in a better state. I think if you wanted to prevent this from happening, I do believe that training for internal employees has kind of gone in the way of the dodo. And I think that we've asked more and more of our IT people to do less and less that they feel comfortable in. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have questions regarding our company or regarding this video, please leave them on YouTube or feel free to contact us using the contact information on c14g.com. Thank you.